fighters who beat Father Time or their prime was after the age of 35. We're talking about the old heads. We're talking about the unks of MMA. I myself included am an unk of MMA, as you guys know. But no, in all seriousness, I wanted to pay some respect to the guys who reached their prime past age 35. Because, you know, in a sport like MMA, where being youthful in order to keep your speed, power, agility, etc., is so crucial to being young. A lot of these guys in this video, all of these guys, were able to reach their prime past the age of 35, which is extremely impressive. So, yeah, let's get right into it. Counting down 10 of these guys in no particular order, starting off with Jan Blachowicz. Now, Jan Blachowicz past the age of 35, if you just look at the wins this guy got, it's pretty impressive. He beat Jimmy Manuwa, who was a mainstay at light heavyweight for a while. He beat Nikita Krylov, which we know how good Nikita Krylov is. He just fights like once every 2 years. He knocked out Luke Rockhold whenever he went up to 205. He beat Jacare in a very boring decision. KO'd Corey Anderson, which was impressive at the time because Corey Anderson was on a win streak and he had already lost to Anderson prior by decision. He KO'd him. Beat Dominic Reyes after Dominic Reyes arguably beat John Jones, which was super impressive because people were looking at Reyes as the uncrowned champ. And he did that at 37 years old to become the light heavyweight champion, which is extremely impressive. And then he was the first guy in the UFC to beat Adesanya, who Adesanya was chasing gold at 205 at the time, trying to become double champion. But Jan Blachowicz said, no, I'm the crafty man here. I am going to beat you, and you're not going to come up to my division and take my belt. And he outstruck Israel Adesanya, and he outgrappled him. First guy to beat Adesanya in the UFC. Super impressive. And then this guy also beat the brakes off of Alexander Rakic and damaged his legs, put him out for an entire year. And this guy gave Alex Pereira the closest fight at 205 still to date. Alex Pereira smoking everybody at 205, couldn't smoke Jan Blachowicz, and he fought to a draw with Magomed Ankalaev, who is arguably the scariest contender in all of 205 pounds. Showed that if you can attack his legs with the leg kicks and just beat up his legs, that he'll resort to wrestling. And imagine if Jan Blachowicz had prime wrestling defense and he wasn't 40 years old. He definitely could have won that fight against Ankalaev. It was so close. But put some respect on Jan Blachowicz's name. The work this guy has done past the age of 35 is second to none. I think he's one of the best prime fighters we've ever seen past the age of 35, just becoming the champion and beating these up-and-comers and giving some of the best guys we've ever seen at light heavyweight some of their toughest fights. But yeah, I had to throw Jan Blachowicz on this list, and he was champ, which was super impressive at age 37. Let's get on to the next one, which is Yoel Romero. Now, although Yoel did not become champ, he was an absolute freak of nature. I mean, this guy entered MMA, I believe, at age 32. That'd be so in 2010, I believe. But this guy was one of the most scary athletes at 185 for the longest time. I mean, a lot of people talk about this guy was built in a lab, and I wouldn't doubt it because his skin is so thick. And this guy had a legit six-pack built, chiseled out of marble at 40 years old, just absolutely shredded whenever he was fighting guys like Chris Weidman, when he was fighting guys like Israel Adesanya and those guys, and Robert Whitaker. And yeah, man, he fought for the interim belt twice, and I think he fought for undisputed twice, if I'm not mistaken. Never won it, but dang, he came close. If he wouldn't have missed weight against Luke Rockhold, he would have became the undisputed middleweight interim champion. Well, not undisputed, the interim middleweight champion. But past the age of 35, he knocked out Derek Brunson. He finished Tim Kennedy, finished Lyoto Machida. One of the guys to beat Jacare Souza in his prime. Flying knee KO Chris Weidman at UFC New York's debut. KO'd Luke Rockhold. Finished Thiago Santos at like 46 years old. I know it was an older Santos, but the fact that Yoel Romero, even till this day, dude's 47, going in boxing matches and knocking guys out and going to the PFL and still getting wins, and in Bellator. Yoel Romero is one of the most insane freaks of nature. Who else do you know that's fighting at age 47 and actually having success? Not Mike Tyson. I know he's 58, but he looked terrible. Yoel Romero still looking decent in his mid to late 40s, which is super impressive. And you want to talk about a guy at 38 to like 42 years old who was one of the scariest middleweights you've ever seen. This guy is an absolute boogeyman. Nobody wanted to fight him because you know if you fight Yoel Romero, just look at the Israel Adesanya fight. Izzy got cracked with one good shot, and Yoel Romero, he didn't want none of that after that. He ran from Yoel Romero the rest of the fight. I know Yoel didn't engage much, so it's on him too. But in his prime, Yoel Romero, what a lot of people also don't talk about is that this guy's like clutch performances, the amount of finishes he had in the third round. I think he finished Derek Brunson in the third round, Tim Kennedy in the third round, Chris Weidman in the third round, Luke Rockhold in the third round, all those guys in the third round, if I'm not mistaken. Just goes to show you that this guy is dangerous. Whether it's round 1 or round 3, he's dangerous. And yeah, respect to Yoel Romero, one of the older guys that just did it his entire career, man. I know he had a lot of losses in the end of his UFC career, but a lot of those losses were really close. He was never like soundly or definitively beat. Even his fights against Robert Whittaker, they were so close. And his fight against Israel Adesanya, you could arguably give him the win. Every time this guy lost, he almost won. So yeah, respect to Yoel Romero. Almost became interim champ, but and champ against Adesanya, but he just couldn't secure it. Let's get on to the next one, which is Glover Teixeira, arguably the biggest unk of MMA. This guy became a champion at 42, which is by far the oldest in modern UFC. When's the last time you heard of a 42-year-old champion? I think it was back when Randy Couture did it, but Glover Teixeira hit what we call a second prime after the age of 35, I would say. A lot of people argue that his prime was before this, but I think his prime was absolutely past age 35, with wins over guys like Jan Blachowicz, who he beat to secure the belt at 42 years old. He beat up Thiago Santos. He beat the brakes off of Anthony Smith in his prime, who he was knocking his teeth out in the middle of the fight. Beat Nikita Krylov, beat Jan Kutalaba, beat Jared Cannonier. So it's like whenever Cannonier was at 205. So a lot of these wins were super impressive. And the fact that this guy was doing most of this at like age like 37 to like 42 is super impressive. And even at 42 years old, he gave Yuri Prohaska all he could handle and nearly finished him so many times. He just made so many technical errors in that fight. A prime Yuri Prohaska gave him all he could handle. And even against Jamal Hill, he went 5 rounds. And I know he got beat up, but man, to take all that damage and punishment at nearly 43 years old, or he was 43, against Jamal Hill for the light heavyweight championship and survive to the bell was super impressive. This guy is one of the most durable fighters we've ever seen. And how good is Anthony Rumble Johnson for putting out Glover Teixeira in a few minutes? But yeah, man, Glover Teixeira, definitely one of the greatest unks we've ever seen in MMA. 42 as champion in prime UFC is unheard of. This probably won't happen again in like the next 10 years just because the divisions are only getting better and better. But got to put some respect on this guy's name for having the longevity that he has. I mean, this guy lost to John Jones in 2014? And then 8 years later at age 42 secures the light heavyweight belt. How insane is that? So yeah, respect to the unk, Glover Teixeira. Let's get on to the next one, which is Daniel Cheeseburger Cormier. Listen, people forget, man, the first time Daniel Cormier fought John Jones, he was 35 years old. And I think after he beat Dan Henderson, he entered his absolute prime. I mean, we want to talk about a guy who was light heavyweight champ at 36 and heavyweight champ at 39. Those numbers are absolutely insane. I know that heavier divisions, you're able to go older without losing just because the power carries longer. But the fact that DC was able to, not the most athletic guy either, was able to do it as a shorter guy and knock out Stipe and beat Rumble Johnson in his prime twice is absolutely insane. Let's go through his wins past age 35. He submitted a prime Derek Lewis. Yes, I think it was prime Derek Lewis. He finished Stipe Miocic in the first round, stopped his most title fight defense streak at 3. He beat Volkan Oezdemir, who at the time was a dangerous up-and-comer, knocking everybody out. Beat him in round 2, I believe. Got him into like the crucifix position and just like hammered away at his face. Submitted Anthony Johnson twice in his prime, which if you know Rumble, he's one of the scariest guys you've ever seen, ever. Beat Anderson Silva on like 1 day's notice at UFC 200. Silva was older, but in my opinion, this was still an impressive win. DC got hurt to the body early in this fight and decided to wrestle Silva. Can't blame him there. And then he beat prime Alexander Gustafsson, which was a very close fight, but he secured the win. So the work that Daniel Cormier did in his prime, and arguably most of those work in his MMA career was done past the age of 35. He had wins against like Roy Nelson, Frank Mir, Josh Barnett, who else? Dan Henderson before the age of 35, but those wins pale in comparison to the career he built after the age of 35. He was in his absolute prime. I would say probably at like 37 to like 39 was prime DC, which is crazy. So yeah, man, put some respect on the Daniel Cormier might be the unk of UFC and like the biggest unk in UFC history. He is like the ultimate unk. So put some respect on DC's name. He did it for a long time. And yeah, man, most of his prime was past age 35, I'd say. All of his prime, in my opinion, because he didn't start training MMA till he was 30 years old. Either way, like, let me mention it one more time. Light heavyweight champ at 36, secured the heavyweight belt at 39 to become a double champion. And he defended his belt at light heavyweight and at heavyweight, which is unheard of. Like, come on, man. Put some respect on this guy's name. Let's get on to the next one. Fabricio Werdum. Now, Werdum is one of the most legendary heavyweight fighters you've ever seen. He's one of the greatest heavyweight grapplers you've ever seen. I mean, this guy was the first guy to beat Fedor Emelianenko after he was on like that 10-year undefeated streak. I think he submitted Fedor with an armbar. He tricked Fedor into thinking he was Rock Fedor, chased him down, and he ended up submitting him. But that was before the age of 35. I think Werdum was 32 whenever that happened. Either way, I don't think he had hit his prime yet, because past age 35, he secured wins over a prime Travis Brown twice, a prime Mark Hunt, who he knocked out with a flying knee to become the interim heavyweight champion. He submitted Cain Velasquez, who was in his prime, and won the championship at 37 years old. He beat up Marcin Tybura, who's still doing it today. He submitted Alexander Gustafsson, who was a little past his prime. And I don't know why I put Mark Hunt on the list twice. Did he beat Mark Hunt twice? He might have. But either way, beating Mark Hunt when you're a grappler by a flying knee KO is absolutely insane. And yeah, man, this guy was the boogeyman of the heavyweight division for a while, because you never wanted to go to the ground with this guy. He destroyed Walt Harris on the ground, who is a solid heavyweight for his time. But most impressively, obviously, is in Mexico City, whenever the meme spawned of sea level Cain. How good would Cain Velasquez be at sea level? Because in Mexico City, he absolutely destroyed Cain Velasquez and submitted him with a guillotine in round 3 after Velasquez gassed out. But the names this guy beat past age 35, becoming the champion, although he couldn't defend the belt, one of the most insane heavyweight grapplers and best fighters we've ever seen across the UFC, Fabricio Werdum. Also to mention, whenever he made Colby Covington call the cops on him for throwing a boomerang at him. Just thought I'd throw that in there, because why not? That happened past the age of 35 as well. Either way, yeah, let's get on to the next one, which is Michael Bisping. Yeah, buddy. The count, buddy. Listen, Michael Bisping, he had a long UFC career, but I would argue that his best wins came past the age of 35. Not only did he become champion, but he went on a 5-fight win streak. His wins past 35 beat guys like Hung Lee, who was a pioneer in Chinese MMA. Beat a guy like Anderson Silva. It was a close fight, but he did beat up Anderson Silva, knocked out Luke Rockhold to win the belt, one of the greatest upsets in middleweight title fight history. Beat Dan Henderson, who was an old man by then. Beat Tyler Latis, which people forget, man. Tyler Latis was like on an 8-fight win streak at this time. And Michael Bisping, I would say, hit his prime right around age 36 to 38 between the Luke Rockhold fight and such, around there. And yeah, man, left hook Larry, as he calls it, won him the championship, because Michael Bisping was nothing more than a journeyman most of his career. He was always that guy that hung around like maybe the top like 5 to 9 of the division, but could never quite crack to that championship opportunity. And when he finally did it, stepped up on 2 weeks' notice against Luke Rockhold, coming off a movie set, KOs Luke Rockhold, who was one of the cockiest fighters in the UFC at the time. I can't lie, that was amazing to watch. But Michael Bisping showing that even if you hit Unk status at 37, you're still capable. You can still go in there, win the middleweight strap. I know he kind of got embarrassed by GSP, but it's GSP. And then he got KO'd by Kelvin Gastelum to finish his career. But respect to Michael Bisping. He achieved his dreams of becoming UFC champion while going on a 6-fight win streak doing it, and all past the age of 35. So, yeah, respect to Michael Bisping. He's now a UFC commentator. And, yeah, let's get on to the next one, which is Randy Couture. Now, Randy Couture is an interesting case, because his MMA career, I believe, started at age 33. So you can argue his entire career was his past 35, which is insane when you consider that this guy was champion 4 times past the age of 35. I think it was 2 times at heavyweight and 2 times at light heavyweight. I could be wrong, but he's beaten absolute legends like Kevin Randleman. He beat Chuck Liddell, who I think he ended Chuck Liddell's like knockout streak when Chuck Liddell was finishing everybody. Beat up Tito Ortiz. Finished Vitor Belfort after Vitor Belfort fluked to injury, went over him, I believe. Beat Tim Sylvia when he was like 44 years old, and Tim Sylvia was in his early 30s. Everybody thought old man Couture was going to get destroyed. Beat Mark Coleman later in his career. Beat Gabriel Gonzaga. And like I said, man, this guy was the oldest UFC champion ever. Achieved it at the age 44 and held the belt until he was 45 years old. That legit, in my opinion, will never happen again. We will never see a champion at the age of 45 again. The guys these days are just too good. But old man Couture, one of the pioneers of MMA, put some absolute respect on this Unk's age and his name, man. Most of his career came past the age of 35, and he did it all the way until age 45, where he was still a champion in the UFC. And yeah, man, one of my favorite fighters to go back and watch. If you want to see an absolute Unk get it done in the wrestling department and just beat up guys by hard work, look at Randy Couture. This guy is a hard man's dream. Ignore that. Hard man's dream. Either way, Randy Couture, Yeah, man, a legendary fighter. Let's get on to the next one, which is Jacare Souza. Now, Jacare Souza wasn't the most impressive because he never became champion and he lost a lot towards the end of his career. But I would argue while it lasted, his prime did go past the age of 35, where he beat a prime Gegard Mousasi, a little bit out of his prime Vitor Belfort, but finished him. Finished Derek Brunson again, looked like the Terminator in that fight, and then destroyed Chris Weidman, where he brutally knocked him out against the fence. And yeah, man, prime Jacare, one of the scariest grapplers we've ever seen. He took Yoel Romero in his prime at 36 to a decision. I know that was the beginning of the UFC career for Yoel Romero in 2015, but Yoel Romero at 36 years old, imagine how athletic he was then. And Jacare went to a split decision with him, and he had wins over a lot of former champions in Chris Weidman, Vitor Belfort, Gegard Mousasi, who was a former champion in other promotions. And yeah, man, the Alligator, one of the greatest fighters we've ever seen in the upper weight classes, or one of the greatest grapplers we've ever seen in the upper middle weight classes. But he did lose a lot towards the end of his career, and he never got a championship opportunity. But I still have a lot of respect for Jacare just because he did it until he fought until he was like age like 42, 43. Although he wasn't winning, he was giving these guys the business to some degree. Either way, let's get on to the next one, where we have Renato Moicano, who right now is in the UFC. And you know what? I'm going to round up a little bit. He beat Drew Dober and Jalen Turner when he was 34. He was like 2 or 3 months away from becoming 35. So I'm going to round up and say those wins were past age 35, because even right now, at the age of 35, where he just absolutely destroyed and manhandled Benoit Saint-Denis. I think Renato Moicano is in his absolute prime. This guy's looking like a world beater. He's looking like he can beat Islam Makhachev this weekend if it wasn't Armit. No, I'm joking. But Renato Moicano, the performance he put on against Benoit Saint-Denis made Benoit Saint-Denis look like he hadn't trained in a single day in his entire life. I mean, you want to talk about beating him up in the stand-up and absolutely destroying him on the ground. If you want to see a great example of damage-based grappling, look at Benoit Saint-Denis versus Renato Moicano. Moicano did so much damage. He took years off of Benoit Saint-Denis' life. And that fight was just a brutal reminder that even the unks of MMA, Renato Moicano beating up a guy like BSD, who's 29 when he's 35, still got it. This guy finished Jalen Turner, one of the greatest comeback wins of his career. He beat up Drew Dober, which was a great performance. And honestly, this weekend, I think he's going to beat up Beneil Dariush, old man Dariush, even though they're the same age. Beneil Dariush in MMA years is probably like 45, whereas Renato Moicano is probably like 36, 37 in MMA years. And yeah, man, I think we're going to have another classic performance from Moicano. He's going to get on the mic, and he's going to call out probably Paddy Pimblett for a money fight, or he's going to call out like a Dan Hooker or a Justin Gaethje or a Dustin Poirier. This guy, if he beats Beneil Dariush, he 100% deserves the top 5 of the division, especially given his wins are super impressive against guys like Dober, Turner, Benoit Saint-Denis, who were all in the rankings at one point. Maybe not Dober, but Turner and Benoit were both in the rankings. If he beats another guy in the top 10, which is Beneil Dariush, he deserves a shot at the top 5. Let's get the unk Renato Moicano, who cannot afford to lose a title shot. And yeah, let's get to the last one of this video, which is one of the craziest ones and one of the greatest fighters past age 35, Alex Poatan Pereira, still in his absolute prime at 37. But people forget, man, whenever he beat Israel Adesanya, he was 35 years old. And that's insanely impressive that he came all the way from kickboxing to make his MMA debut at 34, knock out a bunch of guys like Andreas Michailidis, like Sean Strickland, and then get a middleweight title shot against Israel Adesanya, knock him out, take his belt at age 35. He would lose the rematch against Adesanya, right? Then he would go up to light heavyweight, make his debut, beat Jan Blachowicz in a really close fight. Then he would beat Yuri Prochazka, who was in his prime, 2 times, chin him in both fights, becoming the light heavyweight champion at 36 years old. KO Jamal Hill, saving the UFC 300 event. KO Yuri Prochazka, saving the UFC 303 event again. And then KOing Khalil Roundtree in the 4th round of their fight, literally went into the Matrix. You want to talk about a guy who's showing that father time don't exist. Alex Pereira is that guy. The fact that he is able to do what he's done past the age of 35 after having an extensively long kickboxing career. And I don't think this guy started training kickboxing until he was like 22, 23. So he was a late bloomer in terms of mixed martial arts anyways. And this guy is absolutely schooling the top of the light heavyweight division. And if he beats Magomed Ankalaev, I would not mind him going up to heavyweight and challenging for that belt to become the first 3-division champion. Now, I do think he will beat Ankalaev, but I think he would absolutely get schooled by John Jones or Tom Aspinall just because those guys are way too big and too good in the grappling. But Alex Pereira, the things he's done, he was the first guy to beat Adesanya at middleweight, I believe. He was the first guy to beat, not the first guy, to beat Yuri Prochazka in the UFC, beat him twice. He was the first guy to beat Jamal Hill after he comes back from his injury. He takes Khalil Roundtree off of his 5-fight win streak, beat up Jan Blachowicz, and thwarted off his grappling, which is super impressive because people criticize Pereira for his grappling. And listen, man, even at 37, this guy's still dangerous. He's the best light heavyweight in the world. So put some respect on Poatan. I just wanted to go through today and give some respect to the unks of MMA, the guys who did it past age 35, and currently some of them are still doing it, and just pay some homage to the unks, the old heads, whatever you want to call them, because we always give the young guys some hype for winning the championship like John Jones at age 23. What about the guys who do it later in life at 35? I'd argue that's more impressive, being that your body's breaking down, deteriorating, and you're like, you know what? I don't care. I'm still going to do it. But yeah, let me know if you guys enjoyed the video by dropping a like on it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I am going to be doing a live stream later reacting to the UFC press conference, so look out for that. I appreciate all the support, guys. And also, yeah, thank you guys, and I'm out. Peace.